So he was walking towards the Uber, and we got outside, and he was kind of like, okay, I can't wait, like kind of like I can't wait to get inside the car. So he sat in the back. That was the issue because I had to get him because his body was bigger because of, I don't know if it was, remember it was the water. It had to do with the mix of the medication and the water and the illness. So they put his legs, I put his legs into the vehicle. He was like, okay. I was like, okay. I was like, oh my goodness. And they were going to have a wheelchair waiting for him when he got to the hospital because that's where the appointments were. I was like, okay, I guess they're going to help get him out the car because I don't know how I'm going to do it, you know? So, and I thought to myself, how am I going to get him out the car when we get home? You know, because it was hard to get him inside. So then I buckled Miranda up and I get in. The driver was really, really cool. The car was very comfortable, a little small, but it was comfortable. So he was kind of like, okay. And then the guy's taking off. He's not moving fast. He takes off. He stops at the first light. And that's when Roberto's kind of like, oh my goodness. He's like, can you have me roll down the window? And I was like, okay. We're rolling down the window. And this is I forgot to mention, this is February, around February 15th. So it was a little chilly outside. So we rolled down the window. The driver's like, sure, roll down the window. And he started breathing fast. And I was trying to help him to calm because in the past, a couple of weeks from that date, that happened before, and I had to call the hospital, but he was okay. He was able to, I helped him to control his breathing, and he was fine. The doctor was like, okay, he's okay. So I thought it was the same situation. I was like, okay, just take deep breaths, you know, and just relax. We're going to be okay. We're not too far from there. You know, the windows are rolled down. And then he's like breathing heavily again. I'm like, oh my goodness, like, I don't know what's going on. And then he started slipping away. And then he took my hand, he held my hand, and I was like, oh my goodness, that's not a good sign, because when people usually do that, you see in the movies, that means that they're like, okay, bye. I'm like, that's not gonna happen. So I don't know why he's doing that. And then he holds my hand, and then I'm like, okay. He's breathing heavily. And then we had to stop the car. I had to tell the driver, my husband, I don't think he's breathing. We have to stop the car. And he's like, oh, okay. In the meantime, the light turns green, which is amazing. There was like hardly any traffic. The light turns green. We stopped over by a hospital called Huntington Bank. And we stopped there. In the meantime, he's like doing everything. He's like breathing hard. And I jump out the car. Finally, we stop. I jump out the car. I open the door, and I'm trying to do mouth to mouth CPR. I couldn't do it because it was like, he was like, water was coming from his mouth. And I remember the driver called 911 within seconds. I don't know. They're like around the corner waiting. They finally arrived. And actually it was a police officer. I take that back. A police officer wasn't too far. He came. I had to help him. He asked if I can help him to pull him out the car. He was pumping his chest, the officer. And then I'm like praying. I'm like, and in my mind, because Roberto and we had so many dreams. I mean, literal dreams about our future, about books, about properties that we were going to buy in the future. I knew that he wasn't going to die. So I was like, his work is not done. We have 27 dreams that haven't even come to pass. Even an extra child that hasn't come to pass yet. So in my mind, I'm like, he's going to be okay. They're going to take him to the hospital, and then, he'll probably have to stay a few days and then come home. That would give me some time to rest and focus and figure out how I'm going to get him out the car, when he comes home, So then he's pumping, and I'm noticing that he's pumping a little long. I'm like, usually when that happens, the person, wakes up.
Yes.
He wasn't doing anything. Then the paramedics came and they took the machine. I was like, okay. They're like, with the machine, I don't remember the name of it. They're like pumping and pumping and pumping, and like nothing is happening. And I'm praying. I'm like, and my daughter, she had like a sad look on her face. I'm like, that's all right, Miranda. Everything's going to be okay. And then a police officer came over to me, was asking me questions, just to write down for the police report. And I'm like praying. I'm like, okay. And they rush him to the hospital. And to make a long story short, they rush him to the hospital, and the doctor comes out. And before she comes out, I take that back. They put me in a little room, and I'm like, is that a sign? I forgot to mention, they got a pulse. So they rushed him to the hospital, but he was in critical condition. So they put me in that little room. I was there with my daughter. And then they had the chaplain, and I was like, oh my goodness, so they had the chaplain. That's not a good sign. They had a chaplain there, and she was going to pray with me, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm fine, I'm good, I'm fine. And then I kept hearing code blue announced on the intercom. So she was like, oh, they're calling me. I just need to step out for a while. And I'm like saying to myself, I'm like hoping it's not for Roberto, because I don't know what's going on. They don't know what's going on. So she steps out. And I'm thinking, because I remember my grandmother said, every time code blue means death. So I'm like, you know what? So at that moment, I felt led to drop on my knees and to uh, um, um, to rebuke the spirit of death. Even though I had a worried prayerful mentality at that time, I felt led to pray against death. So I did that 3 times. And then later on, the doctor came to me and she said, literally, your husband died 4 times today. So he had slipped into a coma, and he was in a coma for 7 months. And I had to go through a journey on healing. I learned a lot about healing. I listened to so many people. Andrew Womack was one of the people. And I had to get a new church. I had to get a new church. I found a new church close by who believed in healing. I had to get around people who believed in healing. So I started studying the word with a different light, a different mentality. My prayer life had changed. I had to relearn how to pray. I had this mentality that, oh, God only heals if he's in a good mood. That I had to change all that. In the meantime, I have Miranda, I'm helping her with her schoolwork and managing the business. I had to be at the hospital. I had to be at the hospital to find out what's going on with Roberto. And the doctor's saying he's not going to wake up. He's brain dead. They don't know. They said they don't know how long he lacked oxygen during the time when the paramedics were pumping his chest. So I was like, no, I'm sorry. I don't believe that. I believe that my husband's going to live and not die. And I believe that he's going to wake up. And they said, yeah, but he's brain dead. That's not going to happen. Like his frontal lobe, the personality, everything is gone. And they're telling me this. And this is even before I started hitting the pavement and running with healing, learning more about healing and the not new way of praying, but praying with purpose and getting results.
Right.
So this is before that. And I'm saying, no, that's not going to happen to my husband. Family did not like that.
Right.
They did not like, friends did not like that. They were like, well, you have to think about his quality of living. Like you have to think about, do you think your husband will want to live like that on a respirator? Because they're like, oh, right now, that's what's keeping him alive. And I'm like, no. And then finally, when I went on like a warpath, I should say, I took healing to a different level with learning. I just absorbed everything about healing. And it got to a point I absorbed it so much and started to relearn to pray that nothing would affect me. I began to, that fear, that nervousness and fear I used to live with was gone. And I was able to concentrate. I was able to manage the business. And the funny thing is, the Lord had sent someone who was an intern. She really very professional. And she wanted to start just really quick, she wanted to start a virtual assistant business. But she felt that she needed to get some experience with business owners and coaches first before she did that. She had a full-time job, very professional. She came out of nowhere and asked me if she could help me. And she was going to do it with no charge for the first 3 months and see how everything worked out. The problem was, yeah, I gave her some work to do, but I tried to do it myself. I still tried to do it myself, everything myself. So in the meantime, I'm going back and forth to the hospital. No results. No results. There was one minister that came to visit my husband who believed in healing, because after a while, I had to lock out people who didn't believe in healing. So that's one thing that I learned. And he came from a relative on my dad's side. My aunt's brother used to come and visit. And this is before I found my new church. And I just kept using the knowledge that I had learned from healing. I would go home at night, absorb everything about healing, and go back the next day, and then pray, and things would start happening. It seemed like every week a new sickness or disease or new problem, complication would happen. In the meantime, he's in a coma, would happen. And I would pray and I would get results every time. He would be healed from that. And one time there was internal bleeding. They're like, well, we don't know where the bleeding is coming from. Well, we don't know. And I pray, and even I had a little bit of worry at nighttime, especially at nighttime. I really, really missed my husband. I loved him. I wanted him there with us. So I would pray. And then the next day they would say, oh, we don't know what happened. It just went away. We don't have any proof of what, it just would clear up. And he went to a facility. Eventually he went to a facility. Slowly but surely he started to respond. But I felt led not to say anything to the doctors. And I really was like, well, I don't know why the Lord doesn't want me to say anything, because how are they going to know? I felt led not to say anything. So slowly but surely he would begin to respond. And slowly but surely, still that economical issue would come up every now and then, because I couldn't be at the hospital. I couldn't homeschool, be at the hospital, and market the business and run the business all at the same time. So I had to condense. So I had to condense the business. So I stopped taking additional clients. So I only kept the ones that I was with for a long time.
Right.
Because I needed something. And that little issue came up again about, well, you need to quit your business and go on public assistance because you have too much on your plate. This is what certain family members were telling me. You need to quit your business. You have a lot going on. It's okay because your husband's in the hospital. He's in a coma. And I'm like, I'm not giving up my business. No, I'm not going to do that. And I just felt from the beginning, that time when I was told that I need to give up the office and give up the business, I felt like it was Satan. I'm not saying the people. I'm not saying that the people.
No, I got
watching.
you.
Yeah, I felt like he was trying to rewrite the script for my life. I was like, I'm not going to allow that to happen. And even at that time, finally, I find a new church who believed in healing more than I did, more experience than I did. And the day that I showed up for the first service, they were in a healing kind of like seminar.
Okay.
And I was like, wow, this is what I need. I know nothing, right?
Right.
So they started helping me and building me and praying for me. And then eventually, as during the summer, late summer, I started to build more strength. That nervousness and being scared at nighttime went away. I felt like I had a renewed strength, even though I was trying to do everything myself. I felt like this renewed strength. And it was like my husband became like, not an experiment, but kind of like, because their goal, the hospital's goal, man's goal, was to send him to a facility so he could die. And I was like, my husband shall not die, but live and declare the works of the Lord. And I did everything. I didn't feel led to research anything on Google, because I'm the first person to research on Google. I even felt like, oh, maybe I could do ChatGTP. Maybe I can try to find something like a therapy to help him to wake up a little more. So that didn't work out. So I just felt like the Holy Spirit was telling me just to focus on him, on him, and then he will guide me on what to do with Roberto. So I listened, and I would get there. And I'm the type of person, I do not like singing in front of people, and I'm a little hesitant about praying. I'm not the type of person, I wasn't the type of person to be like, hold my husband's hands, like, oh, like that. I'm not really like that type of person. I'm more like my dad. My dad's kind of like, no, I don't do that. So anyway, so I'm not really like, oh, you hold your hand, like that. But yes, I had to get over myself. I had to get over myself. I had to walk into the hospital room like a soldier, ready for battle. I had to pray the right way, the pray with results. I had to pray everything I was learning. In the meantime, I had to, I sing worship songs, not well, but I sing worship songs. I would talk to him because I learned that it's important to talk to the person
Yes.
who's within a coma. After a while, he would begin to respond, and he would, I didn't really make an announcement about him waking up
Right.
throughout the summer, but he would begin to respond, open his eyes, and look at my daughter Miranda. And I remember one day we were listening really quick. We were listening to his old devotionals, because every Sunday he would do a devotion of my daughter, and we were listening, and he was looking at intensely at the video, but yet he was looking at Miranda, and he slowly moved his eyes and looked at me. And you would think that I would announce, oh, my husband's awake, but I didn't do it. I didn't do it. I just didn't feel led to do it at that time. So he would move his mouth like he was singing
Thank
along with it. Yeah. So little things would happen like that. In between, he would be sent to emergency, because at that time he was at one facility, like a rehab facility. They would send him to an emergency. And that was a whole new thing. I had to adjust my thinking and get in prayer mode and pray against that mountain, whatever sickness he had at that time. I had to
Right.
pray against it, rebuke it. And then a couple of days he would be okay. Then he was sent to kind of like a long-term facility. And that's when things began to change, but he was still responding. On August 30th, 31st, that's when I really made the announcement that he woke up. People from my church that came, they have like a resurrection team, and they came to pray. That day when I came to pray, he was awake, wide awake, more awake than ever before. He stayed awake 2 days like straight. I showed up the next day after the resurrection team came to pray for him. They gave him communion. They played music, and the next day in my heart, I'm like so excited, but I'm a little not fearful, nervous. But as I was sitting there, I remember before the resurrection team, I believe it was before they came. It was two men that came from the church to pray for Roberta, and I remember the Lord saying to me, it was like clear as day, like, yes, Roberto's he's awake, Roberto's healed, but he has to want to live. And when the Lord told me that, I was like, oh, I thought this was it. I thought that you pray, all of this learning, you pray, and he wakes up, and that's it. From there, he would just, miraculously,
Oh,
that's what
yeah.
I thought. And I'm like, oh, I'm okay. I'm excited. I'm excited that he's awake. And I announced it online on my Facebook page. He's awake. I wrote awake with double A's, and then,
Yeah.
and but deep inside, I was like, oh my goodness, but he has to want to live. And then he was like looking around at himself. And I remember even before the resurrection team came, I don't remember, it was a day before, it was a little bit before that, before I made the announcement. I said, you were in a coma for 7 months. And he was like, because he couldn't talk. So he was like, I was like, yeah, but you're okay. You're okay. You're here in Dublin. Everything's okay, Roberto. You are healed. And I felt like I needed to, after the Lord told me that he has to want to live, I felt like I had to convince him, like, you can't move, you can't talk, you can't do anything. Okay. But that doesn't mean that you're not healed. I played Andrew Womack videos. I did everything to try to say, okay, what you're seeing now is not what's going to be, 6 months from now. So the next day I was like saying to myself, oh my goodness, I almost didn't want to go home that night. I left really, really late from, because he eventually went to a nursing home. Of course, they don't call it the nursing home because that's like a negative. It's a convalarium, so they don't want to be negative. But anyway, because what they want to do is they want to send the person there so that they can, die. But so I couldn't wait to get there the next day. Normally I would come like around 2-3 o'clock. That was the time I would come. And then I decided to get there at 9 o'clock in the morning. I wanted to see if he was still awake. And I get there and I'm like, I can't wait. I couldn't get in there fast enough. And I get in there, he's awake. I'm like, yes, Roberto is awake. And I was like, "Hi, Roberto, how you doing?" And then I washed my hands inside of his little bathroom. I washed my hands. I came out, and before I started reading scriptures and playing music and prayer, because that's normally what I would do, but his eyes would be closed, and then eventually he would open them, and then I would like, "Yes, Roberto's awake." I would take pictures and show his mom and short videos, and I would show my daughter. She would come sometimes, and then she's like, "Hi, Daddy," and his eyes are awake. "What did Daddy do today?" I would say. And so I was like, "Yes, Roberto, this is great. You're gonna get out of here. What you see right now, you can't move, you can't do anything, but it's not gonna be like that. God has already healed you. We're gonna go visit New York. We're gonna go to the baseball game and to see the Yankees, even if they don't win, doesn't matter. We're gonna get a VIP booth. We're just gonna laugh and talk. We're gonna go to Port Jefferson. Everything's going to be good. You're going to write that book that, remember you said when you were at the hospital, when you were able to talk and everything. You're going to write that book, Plant-Based Me. I would say Plant-Based Me. You're going to write that book. Everything's going to be back to normal. Okay, Roberta." Then in October, around October 5th, between 5th and 10th, on October 10th, I remember I woke up that morning and I had, it was like a vision. And Roberta was standing next to one of the men that were praying for him at the hospital. And he had a suit on. And I was like, to me, I'm taking that as, oh yeah, that's confirmation that everything's going to be okay. Roberta's going to live and not die. So at 3 o'clock that afternoon, prayer hotline. And I'm like, at the moment that I had called, it was around 3 o'clock. I called for prayer for my husband, waking up fully, because he was awake, but it wasn't as intense as it was that day, August 30th and 31st. And I was like, wow, okay. So then I got a phone call as I was on the prayer line. I had called one of the prayer lines, and then when I got off, I had a missed call. So I called back the Convalarium, because that's where he was staying, the Convalarium Dublin. And I'm like, "Oh, okay. I just had a missed call." He said, "Oh, sorry, Danielle. We just took your husband to an emergency because his heart stopped." And I'm like, "Heart stopped?" And then in my mind, I didn't even panic. In my mind, I just went into prayer mode. I just went into prayer mode at that moment. So I called the hospital where he was. And then when I called, they're like, "Oh, I'm sorry, Mrs. Davis, but your husband expired at 3:20." And I'm like, it didn't stop there. I get to the back, I get to the morgue. They have him on the table, and I see that toe tag that everybody always talks about.
Yes.
But it wasn't on his toe. It was like up towards the where the bag is located. He was they had him open, and he looked so peaceful. He looked so peaceful, and I'm like saying to myself, I'm still praying. I'm focused. I'm praying, and the people from the team, they come for the resurrection team. They do the same thing. They pray. Nothing happens. Nothing happens, because they've prayed for people before, that church, and if people have came back from the dead.
Right.
So I thought that would happen. So nothing happened, and I remember one man had turned to me and he had said, "Well, Danielle, you did everything that you were supposed to do. You prayed everything. And the goal was to just let Jesus handle the rest." They never said, one thing I like, they never said, "Well, Danielle, as you can see," or "didn't answer your prayer." They didn't say that. They were just like, "You did everything that you knew how to do. Jesus is proud of you. You did everything you're supposed to do for your husband. Just sit back and just let the Lord take the rest, take on the rest, and see what happens," kind of thing. So they were leaving. And then at that time, I was going to come back. I was like, well, if he doesn't wake up today, I'm going to come back tomorrow. So they actually allowed me to say, "Okay, we normally don't do this, but tomorrow you can come back." And I was like, "Yeah, I would like to do that." So the men, they leave the room. And then the nurse and another administrator, not nurse, I'm sorry, administrators, they begin to leave, and I'm packing stuff up because I'm leaving. But in my mind, I'm like, well, he didn't wake up. That's okay. He'll wake up tomorrow. So as I'm turning, I look back at him, and his head is like slightly turned. And then he has like this smile, like almost like he has like a smile relief, like a relief smile, like on his face. Like, and I'm like saying to myself, yeah, Roberto, I'm saying in my mind, Roberto's going to live, not die, and declare the works of the Lord. And I'm like, it has to happen. So as I'm turning and I grab my stuff and I look back at him, I hear it distinctly. The Lord allowed me to hear him say, allowed me to hear Roberto say, Danielle, I'm okay. And then that's it. And I'm like saying to myself, whoa, okay. And I was happy to hear Roberto. I was happy for Roberto to say, Danielle, I'm okay. I'm happy. I was happy for the Lord to allow me to hear that.
Right.
But I'm saying to myself, yeah, of course you're okay. You're in heaven, but you need to be here. I'm saying that in my mind as I'm leaving, you know. And then the administrator is kind of like, she's trying to talk to me and console and talk about death. Oh, the funeral home. And I'm like saying to myself, no, that's not going to happen. I go back home and I still have my business to run. I still have my daughter to take care of. And that night I was like, I'm going to focus. I'm going to focus on how to pray the prayer that Roberta would be risen from the dead. That was my focus for the next 24 hours. So I get back to the hospital. He didn't wake up. I'm still focused. I'm not giving up. And I have a friend talk to me from the church, and she was just trying to console me. One thing that I appreciate is that no one ever said, "Oh, well, Danielle, what you're doing is wrong. It's not." I'm happy that they didn't say anything. They were just kind of like, "Well, we're on your side. We're praying for you." They would drop a little hints, but But finally, the ending part. Um, that weekend, my church was having I forgot the name of it. They were having a conference about heaven. Now, in my mind, I was like, oh, I would love to go to that conference, but I don't want to have anything to do with heaven right now. I want to talk about life, okay? Because I would be the first person at the conference. I'm like, but you're talking about heaven. That's for people who are not here right now.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm going to focus. Maybe I'll listen to the replays after Roberto is up and walking. I'll go back in the future.
Right.
Yeah. So my friend invites me. She was like, she got me in because it was you had to pay for registration and everything. It was a 3-day, 2 nights and it was 3 days together. And she invited me. I didn't go the first night because that Saturday in my mind, I'm like, well, maybe I will go just to see what it's about. But in mind, I'm thinking, well, remember, still have to go back because I took 2 days off. Nobody does this. I took 2 days off because I need to get my mind equipped to go back to the hospital to pray that prayer that he be risen from the dead. So I go that Saturday morning to the event, and my goal was to go that afternoon to the hospital, and then I would go back to the conference afterwards. So I'm there, and then I go up for worship, and I'm just about to sing, and then I close my eyes and I begin like a prayer, and then the Lord tells me, He's like, it was His decision, as in it was Roberto's decision. So He said,
Right.
it was His decision. You will reunite one day, just not now. So at that moment, I felt peace, even more peace. And I was just like, you know what? That's it. That's the answer. There was no reason for me to go back and pray again. So I took a deep breath. I made the announcement on Facebook because, the past 7 months I've been talking about healing, but that was when I kind of like let go. And I just had this supernatural peace. My daughter had this supernatural peace about her
Yeah.
dad. She was okay with it. But
Okay.
that's where I'm at right now. That was back in October, on October 10th. Yeah. Yeah.
That is amazing life to go through.
Yes.
And every step of the way,
Mm,
God has been with you
yes.
and your daughter and
Mm,
Rebecca.
yes.
And it is important. You have witnessed it. You have
Yes.
witnessed how God used everything to help you heal,
Yes.
even your daughter,
Yeah.
and Roberto,
Yes.
because everybody thinks of things differently.
Hmm.
But if you, based on what you have shared,
Hmm.
for me, I have seen the connection between you learning about spiritual healing
Hmm.
to help you and your daughter have spiritual well being.
Yes.
And for you to have that peace, it's only God. That's the only way I can
Hmm.
explain it.
Yes.
Others who don't have that level of understanding would not see it and would think of it as something totally different.
Yes.
But your story and your testimony is something that can help many. And you're a writer, you better write that book.
Yes. Right.
And guess what? That is the books of you and Roberto and
Yes.
your daughter.
That's true.
That's the book
Yes.
that's coming out. So he didn't leave you. He's
Exactly.
right there. That's the book. That's the play.
Yes.
That's everything that you just talked about at the beginning. I saw it just playing its way through.
Hmm. Wow.
And I, listening to you and hearing your personality speaking, you would want to do everything one time.
Yeah. Yes.
You can understand why.
Yes.
Because it's the way you have experienced it.
Yeah.
But ask God for people who understand Him, that is God,
Yeah.
to be able to help you transform this experience into life
Yes.
for others. So you've prayed and have learned a lot about healing, but
Mhm.
now you have to transform your prayers to more to that of life
Yes.
in others.
Yes. That's true.
So I am
I hadn't
happy
thought
that
about that.
you shared this information with me. And this is information
Yes.
because this can be from a testimony to a teaching to help others.
Yeah.
And you have experienced something that not many can handle. Thank and praise God for that.
Yes.
So you can now expound worldwide
Mhm.
God's love and
Yes.
how He works. This is a very great example of learning that life trials or storms
Mhm.
is just what it is, a trial or a storm.
So,
None of these things last.
mhm.
And being a believer helps you to see what the happy goal
Yeah.
or ending is. And you've had more than just a glimpse of that.
Yeah.
You've had the opportunity to see that happen in a couple of months.
Right.
Thanks to you. I have to
Oh,
say blessings to you
oh, thank
and
you.
thank you so much for sharing the story with us because even though you went through and it would look at like grief to some, but this is
Mhm.
actually more so a journey that
Mhm.
has just started for you.
Yes.
And you can now use this journey spiritually to help others and help them to learn how to change their mindset
Mhm.
on grief or sadness and be able to help themselves and others
Mhm.
as they live and go
Yes.
through different journeys or similar journeys like yours.
Mhm. That's true.
So I am happy you shared this with me today. Listeners, you're probably thinking this is a big one. It is, because during this time of year, some may be sad of what's going on currently,
Right.
but there is always a bigger plan. We may not be able to see it, and God will give us glimpse of it. We'll get visions, we'll get dreams, but He just give us a glimpse of what it is we could handle, so that when that time comes and that time passes, you'll be like, oh, so that's why I found out this when I did and how it happened, so that you could be a better being to represent your maker. So thank you so much,
Oh, you're
Danielle,
welcome.
for sharing this with me. And I can see how you can use this to even explain more about your business in our next meetup, so that people could understand how to use their life, even though there are a lot of things going
Yes.
on, how we can still focus on what our talents are that God have us to use to go out there and move forward. So this has been FXWB New Beginnings podcast with Michelle and today Danielle. Thank you so much, Danielle, for
You're
your
welcome.
time and just sharing your story with us today.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed myself.
Problem. We will see you guys soon.